Okay, Assalamu alaikum. I hope you can hear me. Okay, waiting for people to join. Please, hello everyone. Hope you're doing well. Okay, so I hope you can hear me. I hope the sound quality is good. Uh, please confirm that so we can start talking in this live. Okay, waiting for people to confirm. Please, anyone confirm that the sound is good or everything so I can start talking? Okay, salam. It's good, good, alhamdulillah. So, what can I say? Salam alaikum again. Well, welcome again to to another live. I know I just was absent a few days, but also teachers are so busy these days with exams. I know everyone is on edge. I know everyone is stressed. I know that some they are going to pass. Tomorrow we have Sila, and everyone is panicking, and this is the worst thing you can ever do. Good. So, okay, I'm going to first to talk before I'm going to jump and talk about the questions. So please save the questions for later. Now I'm going to talk about what you should do, how you can start even writing. You see, one of the problems that students do usually when they start, mostly when you go there and you want to answer, is usually even the first minutes in dealing with the question, because these minutes usually are really so crucial when it comes to your answer. So my piece of advice as I'm going to start with today is starting even writing when you go to that place when you sit. So the first thing that I want you to do, and I advise you not to do, in fact, is to panic. But how? The moment you are going to take the question in and you will have it in your hand, that moment, I don't want you to look at the question. I want you to remember this because this is something so important. Don't look at the question at that moment when they give you the question, especially when you are in stress and maybe panicking, your heartbeats are so elevated, the adrenaline is so high. That moment, if you read the question, trust me, that first impression you will get from the question is going really to harm you. So you need first to calm down, really calm down to the moment that you feel good. And then only then try to look at the question. And when you look at the question, don't try to even to think if it's difficult or easy. No, don't jump and say that the question is difficult or easy. No, don't say that because that is going only to harm your perspective concerning the question. I need more sharing of this video, please. I don't see people sharing. Share, please. Everyone share there. So first thing, take a moment, pause, and then, only then, decide to look at the question later. Because if you are going directly to read the question, trust me, your perspective is going to be so limited concerning how you are going to answer the question. And that is so important to the next point I'm going to talk about. When you receive the question, and this is something that I really don't want you to forget. Always remember, any question asked in academia, it's not the question itself that is important. It's important that the question is trying to fix a problem, is trying to amend the situation. Always bear this in mind. So if you are, for example, asked about discourse analysis, even if you are, for example, the importance of discourse analysis, or they ask you, for example, how discourse analysis can be beneficial, for example, in language teaching, always remember why this question even is asked. I mean, what kind of problem are we solving with this question? For example, in the case of discourse analysis, everything that you will deal with discourse analysis is to analyze a text, to analyze a discourse, analyzing a discourse to understand more to understand information about the text that maybe are not there, that is not there even in the discourse itself, which is what we say, for example, to read between lines. But when it is attached to when this idea is attached to language teaching, it's something else. So we want to enhance language teaching. So you bear this in mind. It's not that you are going to talk about discourse analysis just for discourse analysis, just in case if it is related with language teaching. So at the end, we want to enhance language teaching. With this in mind, you will know how to start that very first sentence in your introduction, and it will keep you focused. For example, this is one of the questions that was asked to me, said how discourse analysis benefits language teaching. I said at the beginning that you can start, for example, I can start in the first sentence by either talking that language teaching, it's important to, in language teaching, or often deal with discourses and text, and discourse analysis is also the same thing. Or you can start by emphasizing that both of them, the idea of discourse and text are so important, and this is a shared background, a shared ground between the two. So this kind of stuff. But my piece of advice, the first piece of advice is that you don't need to panic. Don't read the question while your heart is so elevated, because that is going only to cause issues, and you will lose that sight of what I can include in my include also in my answer. So this is the first thing. Once you're calm, you can start talking about, you can start answering questions. Now, as I said, the second piece of advice that I said, I always ask the question, why this why this question is asked to me. If I'm asked, for example, the question about the importance of technology, why? Is it I'm supposed to talk about technology, or am I supposed to talk about teaching? Because I don't think that, for example, in case of in English, they are not going to tell you to talk about technology. It's not, we are not measured in technology. We are measured in language teaching. So every question that is asked, so is going to take you to language teaching. Even that, for example, if it is applied linguistic, if the question is an applied linguistic, at the end, it's you are dealing with the language. So don't forget this, because most of the time when students are asked question, for example, let's say they are asked question about ICT, when you read their essay, it feels that they are only talking about ICT. They leave no room for the talk about language. So this is it. I don't see that chats. I don't see like questions in the chat. So please, if you have questions, you can ask questions. So I said, don't read questions. This is most important thing when it comes to read the question when in that state where you're really afraid. Because I know most students, especially those who have invested like a long time in revising. And these students usually they feel so stressed because they feel that's so much at stake. They spend maybe months in revision, and this can all go to waste. And trust me, when you work on your mind and you are working on your language skill, nothing does go to waste. So everything that you are doing there is going to help you. Of course, when you talk about succeeding or winning, it's something so difficult because you are competing with like a huge number of students, but still, you can do it. So I'm waiting for questions. I have the model discourse analysis. Your advice, please. Well, if you are asking about discourse analysis is what? Is it itself discourse analysis? Can you give me more information about this? Or is it discourse analysis plus applied linguistics or what? So I need to know the question. What do you do when you are out of info about the topic? When you feel that you don't have any piece of information, you have to improvise. I used to do a trick. It's like, for example, I don't have the exact answer, but I can bend the question a bit to talk about something that I have prepared. But this bending has to be done in a very clever way that you don't make it sound like you really don't know what you are. Let's say I don't know the answer. I'm going to give you an example. If, let's say, for example, you are going to talk about characteristics of learners, and you're supposed to talk about learners, let's say for learning styles, and you just you don't remember learning styles or you haven't revised learning style, but you have learned, for example, learn autonomy. Maybe you know something about affective factors. So you can try to kind of change, mold the answer to show that, yeah, it's kind of one of the problems in learning styles, but it's only one. Because sometimes you are asked to develop so many elements, but you are only majored in one. You can still do it as long as that one element exactly, you develop it in a way that it makes it really feels that you are, you know what you're talking about. What's the best method to adapt when teaching English in primary school? For this question, I would say, if I'm asked about how can I teach in primary school, I would talk about TPR, total physical response, because not just specifically total physical response, but at least I talk about the idea of involving learners with physical activities because you are dealing with young learners, and young learners usually they need to move, they need to work. So I would say you talk about the same characteristic of TPR, total physical response. I would say also you can talk about working with projects because when it comes to learners, primary students, primary learners, they like to be involved in project, working in something, make it something. So this is so important. So you can say that you use project-based approach rather just teaching them content, but they can make something. So the skills you are going to talk about these skills also in making something, creating something. You could talk about the use of technology in this regard. Okay, what do we have here? Okay, the model itself is discourse. If it's discourse analysis, so your job is quite easy. You have just to talk about the definitions, the scope of discourse analysis, all the characteristics. If there are any kind of theoretical background of discourse analysis, trust me, there's something also you have to focus on trends. Always remember, if you are passing an exam in any field, try to look for a trend. What is trendy now? This is so important because it's going to really help you. We have hello, doctor. If you ask about teaching the four skills, what we will discuss, for example, discuss the place of writing and the method. It's so easy, by the way. When you talk about writing, it's going to take you, for example, when you start with the grammar translation method, because grammar translation method is that method that's really focused on the writing skills. That was the, like say, you can say the, was that so important, writing and reading, because it helped and it succeeded in yielding learners who are able to write accurately, but not, of course, in terms of communication, just writing accurately. Then you have the other side, we have the direct method. There was no writing at all. That's an extreme limit there. Then you have what we call the modern approaches. When we have like communicative approaches, we don't focus on writing as itself, writing as a skill, but we focus on writing as a way of communication. You have to remember this because when you talk about writing, writing itself is a skill, but we focus on it as a way of communicating. And here we balance between fluency and accuracy in when we talk about a writing skill. Still, when it comes to writing accuracy, of course, it's favorable, but still, we we kind of balance between the two. And remember the idea that it's not only writing, it's also for communication. This is so important to remember. Can we use quotes as a hook? No. My piece of advice, this is of course personal preferences. I don't like quotes, especially most of the time when students send me an essay to tell me evaluate it and I read the quote, I find the quote talking about, let's say, the North Pole, قطب شمالي, and he's talking about language teaching. It makes me sad sometimes even laughing so much. Okay. So could you please explain the assessment and evaluation in language teaching? Thanks in advance. Of course, if you are going to talk about assessment and in evaluation, there are two things. We talk about assessment and evaluation of the learning process from the perspective of learners. So we want to see whether we have attained the objective of the course we have set. That is something. That's all. We have assessment and evaluation. Of course, you need to know the difference because usually assessment means that you are going to correct something. Evaluation means usually just for categorizing, classification. But also when we talk about assessment and and evaluation. Also, we talk about the learning process itself. Here we try to correct whether the teacher has done a good job. Is there anything can be fixed when it comes to language teaching? Maybe something it changed at the language class. Maybe, for example, some techniques can be changed. So always remember to talk about assessment and the side of learners and the side of teachers. And you have this trendy talk about washback effect because it's so important. Mm, you may be asked about it, or maybe you can include it in any essay you want to write. Uh, Culture and language, British civilization. Oh my God. Trust me, when it comes to civilization, I'm not majored in civilization, so I'm clearly unqualified to talk about civilization. Those who ask me about culture, a culture usually it's really limited in the time or in the type of topics we can talk about. For example, we talk about unless you are majored in culture, which I don't think so, just culture for the sake of culture. It's always culture and language. So it's the place of culture in language and the place of language in culture. You see, the place of culture in language, the language in culture. Then it takes you to the debate of how should we teach culture to culture of the target language, or should we teach the culture of the native language? Then, so which one? Then you have the approaches of teaching culture. This is so important. So these are the ideas that I can think of now. Okay, let me see. Concerning discourse analysis, I really confused what I focus on revision. Trust me, if you are super confused, just stick with the definitions, with the scope, and with the trending topics that we have now concerning discourse. If you are confused and it's too late, definition, scope, why do we need discourse analysis? And if there are some approaches, methods, of course, in that field, and of course, trending topic. This is at least what you should focus on, yeah, at least. Okay, sir, you posted the questions and not the answers. Some of us who are not able to come, are you going? Trust me, yesterday we had a very good, in fact, meeting. Trust me, in 1 hour and a half, we could only answer 5 questions. Like we answered them. I gave like the thesis statement. They should only 5 questions. And sadly, it was not recorded because of a lot of problem. We can't record students, you know that. So trust me, I can't answer the questions. I may do live video again, but it's really sad that I really can't. Are quotation necessary? Sometimes they are necessary. They can be plus when it comes to your writing style. But I said maximum one or two. Don't write too many. Literary criticism. That's Miss Alia. It's really out of my topic. So, what would you focus on general culture? As I said, language, culture, culture, language, and the approaches of teaching culture. All these are so important when it comes to so they are very limited. Just go back to the life, you will find more information, I said. Second language learning belongs to Chomsky? No, come on. No. Chomsky just gave the idea of, yeah, he simply not contradict. I mean, he said that behaviorism with the idea of behaviorism and their view of language of learning is really limited. And we started talking about cognitivism and cognitive approach, but it's not only him. We have so many theories after that. Cognitivism, interactionism, social interaction. So no, there are so many theories in this regard. Okay, so what's the difference between TEFL and didactic? Trust me. If this question is asked to me, TEFL it's a teaching English, so it's just only about English. When it comes didactic, it's everything. It's a science of teaching itself. But TEFL it's just concerned with English. At the end, they are both the same. TEFL just is limited to English. It's in the name there. Please, in University of Blida, it was mentioned that the first exam will be about general culture. Does it mean that it depends. I can't say for sure. I don't know. But if it is like the project is about teaching, it's impossible. I find it weird. The question cannot be just our culture. We are not anthropologists, by the way. We are not anthropologists. Anthropologists are going to deal with culture, mere culture. They study culture, everything. We are supposed to be majored in language teaching. But well, those who literature, that's something else. But in literature, Even in literature these days, they talk about language teaching more than they talk about the literature. So it's always like the place of literature and language teaching, etc., etc. So I would say when it comes to culture, as I said, always link it with language. There is the link how language is related to culture, how culture is related to language. You have two ways. You have how we teach culture in language class, then that debate of teaching targets culture, etc. So this is something I would do in my case. Methodology is really difficult for me what to focus on exactly. Though, by the way, methodology is my piece of cake because I really love it. But it is not difficult, trust me. Methodology is what? It's simply a way of thinking and conducting research. And to conduct research, we need reliable, authentic data, reliable, proven, objective data, etc. Uh, you take these criteria. Now, in the research methodology, there is a process. There is what we call the research process. Research process, of course, starts with finding a problem, limiting the problem, forming research questions, maybe hypotheses, the design of the methodology itself. That starts from the sampling technique. Then you have the approach. Then, of course, approach starts from the beginning. And then you have data collection tools, procedures, data analysis procedure. Then you have report writing. A problem with the research methodology is what? It's like everything is connected. So if you start by research question, and yes, we say research questions, the moment you form research question, you have already decided everything. You can't write the research questions and you don't know how you are going to collect data. So the moment you design a research questions, you already, and remember this word, you have conceptualized the whole process. So from data collection, from data analysis, and how you are going to analyze it. And this is the difficult thing about research methodology, because even when we teach it sometimes, we start by a lecture, but still we find ourselves so obliged to talk about other ideas in the research methodology. The ethics in research, what I just yesterday, Mr. Lakhdar, I have talked about this in my live video. It was one of the questions that was asked, by the way, concerning ethics. نعاود نقول مرة تانية. Ethics من مجالها الضيق, from a very limited perspective. You are going to talk only about plagiarism, honesty and honesty, dishonesty, of course, when it comes to research. But that's only one very limited scope. And I want you to talk about it systematically, starting from the process itself. So the first thing in finding a problem. The first thing when it comes to a problem, a research problem, you always say that you need to start to think about a research problem that is ethical. It means that something that is going to help your community. It's not going to harm the community. So we are responsible as researchers for safety for community. So if we are going to create something so harmful, let's say, for example, I'm going to create a virus or creating a bomb, this is going to be unethical. The same thing, for example, as researchers on language. Some topics are a bit taboo and they are going to start controversial and they are so controversial. So we try to avoid this topic because maybe they are going to harm our community. That's first. Then the research questions, the same thing. One of the principles we say when you pose a question, it should be ethical. It should not provoke some people, because some questions, they can be research questions and we can devise research for them, but they can be provocative. So this is something we don't want to do. Then you move to the collection of data. You want to collect data, and at the same time, you want to collect it, do it in honest way. You don't want to lie. You don't want to modify them, or how can I say modify them? Yes, to be beneficial for your work. And in the same time, you want to protect, if you are dealing with people, especially us in research, we deal with people, so we don't want to harm people. Since we are collecting data from them, we want to protect them. We want to protect the data also. Then you move to, for example, report writing, where you have this plagiarism, etc., etc. So only at the end you have that idea of plagiarism. How to evaluate teachers' method? Can you clarify how to evaluate teachers' method? If you are talking about evaluating and assessing the learning process itself, I mean, from the lesson, for example, as teachers, when we design a lesson plan, we are required, even by the end of the lesson, not only to evaluate learners' performance, but we evaluate our performance as teachers. What is missing? Is there any problem? For example, some objective they are not attained, not because learners did not was failed enough, just because the way of teaching is lacking something. Maybe you have overlooked something. Maybe the learners you have they need different style. Maybe the activity was boring. We always say as teachers, sometimes when we teach two classes, you teach one class in one lesson. This is an example you can use. Then when you move to the second class, you find yourself that I need to change this because you thought you had the impression that it's going to work, but it didn't work with your students. So you need to change. So this is something usually teacher has to do a reflection on his own way of teaching. I just want to ask about, can we mention the importance of e-learning, any kind of question. هي تبع معايا Miss Muhammad, I think, Mr. Muhammad. You should do what? Always remember, if I can include an idea that I have here, because the more I write, the better. Let's say, for example, I'm talking about improving classroom activities. Directly with classroom activities, we talk about the use of technology. So you find yourself talking about it. If you are talking about if you are talking about, let's say, for example, enhancing teaching at universities, now we talk about e-learning because it's something there. We are talking about it. So it's so important to try to include it if you can. What should be focused in research methodology? Everything. Trust me, everything. You need to know the whole process of research methodology. وما فيهاش بزاف, just process. Then you focus on the idea of ethicality, and that's it. That's it. دايما تفكر باللي research methodology is about providing reliable data in a systematic way. كان عقلت فكرت واحد السؤال مرة, how research methodology benefits I think the field of education. It's the same thing. The answer is simply that we want to produce reliable data, reliable information that can be proven, that is proven, and it can be generalized, that way of being systematic, it helps teachers, because at the end, what do we want to do? When we have an approach, we make sure that this approach works under all circumstances, and we make it general to all people. I have a problem in the memorization of quotation. What is the average number of citation required in a PhD essay? I would say, that's the thing. If you can write more citation, but 2, 3 will be plus. I don't think you need a lot, but still, if you can memorize, it'd be good. And don't think of them about memorizing citation. Think about it, for example, analytic method. One of the questions in PhD was that Harmer said that one of the reason failure in teaching because most approaches are relying on Western ideas. You see this question, I just remember it. You can use the same thing, and you say, for example, according to Harmer, and you need to remember the book and just the year and maybe the page. You don't need even the page. It's just the year and, of course, Harmer there. And so you have used the question and use it. And this is one of the things I always ask my students to do. Use the same questions that you have revised, you have answered, sometimes in an answer of other questions. So when talk about learning second language, we mentioned theories of behaviorism, mental, and so on. If you are talking about second language learning in a chronological order, of course, that you have the behaviorism, cognitivism, you have interactionism, social interaction, and etc. Constructivism, and you carry on. That's chronological order. They are so easy to remember because they follow kind of very good chronological order. So we have to study universal culture and how can we carry it through language, not specific culture. No, we don't talk about specific culture at the end because we have several culture. Even in one city you have culture. For example, we live in Algeria. We have اوكي 58 ولاية. كل 58 ولاية عندنا 58 ثقافة وفي الولاية فيها ثقافة. We talk about also Europe, United States. So again, but usually you have to take just a general idea what makes a culture, the characteristic of a culture. And you kind of devise an essays about that debate of including the culture of the target language or the native one, etc. Okay, how can discourse analysis be related to literature? As we have, it's so obvious, missed and seen. It's so obvious. Discourse analysis is about analyzing a text, what is in between the lines. And literature, I do believe that I'm not majoring in literature, but I can tell you that in literature, everything is between the lines. It's not only the meaning that is visible there in the text, but also the meaning, the hidden meaning. So discourse analysis has everything to do with literature. And by the way, most of the time when discourse analysis is the idea of discourse analysis approach is always with literature. This is what I believe. What are the critics of competency-based approach? It's simply the idea of competency-based approach that we focus on competency. Competency means that it's not only the knowledge or the skill, just the knowledge, but to know how to use these knowledge and they're going to be rendered into competencies. The problem with competency-based approach is so heavy on the idea of that learners what they need to do. So this is first. The second thing, competency-based approach is always kind of realizes accompanied with project-based approach. How can you be sure that this student has really gained that competency by making kind of a project? And this is why the talk about competency is really difficult. وزيد كان اللي دي تاع competency based approach is related with evaluation. By the way, you know that you need to evaluate every competency alone and to see if that student has really gained that knowledge you want or not, or the objective. So we use competency based approach, but at the same time we really have problem in this regard. Okay, we have can you please give us some kind of checklist to see whether our introduction is informative enough? The checklist, the first sentence should be كيما نقولها لكم كيما هكذا. انت علاش مسقسي لي كاع هذا السؤال؟ Why are you asking me this question؟ انا نعطيك مثال دائما نستعمل. درك انت يجي صاحبك يحكي معك يقول لك اسمع واش عندك من بعد؟ This is the question. واش عندك من بعد؟ كاين زوج احتمالات. If you are curious like me راح تقول علاه تسقسي. يهمك علاه تسقسي ما يهمكش السؤال because you know the answer. It's the same thing. انت كي نسقسيك سؤال رانا عارفين بلي عارف الاجابه. جاوب عليه. Why have you even asked me the question? So if I'm asked the question about the use of technology, it's not because I want to know the technology. I want to know the use of technology in language teaching. So at the end, it's to me enhancing language teaching is what matters. أنا من نجم نديك الجملة تاعي. So I can start that. Enhancing language teaching, that educationists have always sought to enhance the teaching learning process by let's say minding several aspects, among which is the inclusion of technological tools. Method. This is an example. This is just draft. Don't criticize me. Okay, so when you start with that sentence, sentence after it, usually it's the answer. It's like really the answer to the question. Usually it's the answer of the question. The third sentence can be kind of an outline. Not kind of outline, it should be an outline. And still, the whole introduction is an outline. And every sentence right, it's going to be developed later. But still, usually what we need to do is to show or to indicate kind of an outline, either implicit or explicit. عادة مثلا راح تقول لي I'm going to talk about certain criteria. تقول criteria 1, 2, 3, 4. This 1, 2, 3, 4 هذيك الاوتلاين تاعك. هذوك اللي راح حاب نشوفهم بعد in the development. So difference between CBA اشوف ما تعطونيش لا ربي ما تعطونيش abbreviation اكتبهم لي so I can know. There are many teaching approaches. Miss Ali right. There are many teaching approaches and I'm really confused. Which one do you consider important in which? شوف يلا كنا نبغى نبسطوهم كاع. Miss عابد, you have to differentiate between traditional approaches and modern approaches. So كاين traditional approaches اللي باينين and you have modern approaches عادة قاعد يدخل تحتهم they are under the umbrella of communicative approaches. هاد المودرن approaches تدخل فيها CBA, project based, task based approach. والحاجه اللي فيهم زينه هم قاعد يتشابهوا مع بعضهم. كان تراجع واحد تبدل غير زوج كلمات كل يجوا كيف task based approach, project based approach. بدل غير the idea of the task and the project كيف خاطر because we say project comprises of several tasks. Task comprises of activities. So for those who have asked me this once. So it's easy. تروح التراديشنال باينين عندك الجرامر ترانسليشن، عندك دي اوديو لينجوال اور ذا دايركت. يجوك وحدين شويه غريبين شويه تما داخل سجستوبيديا وحدين، هذوك they were more focusing on the learners affective factors. راجع فيهم شويه the silent method. You can use them, but I don't see them asking about them, but still they can ask. Are those live sessions regular, sir? Want to attend? I hope they can be regular. It's one of my aims that this class, I always share my ideas. Inshallah, I will always share with them. Inshallah, we hope so. Assessment should address production rather than reproduction. What should we? It's one of the questions that I really love. Sure, I'm going to answer you in a very simple way. Usually, as teachers, when we design our especially with comes middle school or secondary, when did they design questions for their exam, it's like they give the same questions that learners had in class. So learners are going to do what? Can reproduce the same knowledge they had. This is the reproduction. Assessment, it should be about production, means what? That's in the exam, they need kind of, or assessment in general, they need to produce new knowledge based on something they have studied, but it's not repetition, it's kind of a new knowledge. هنا هذا الكيستيون يديك اللي دي تاع washback effect that teachers sometimes we change the way of teaching according to the assessment. It takes you to the idea of creativity. It takes you creativity and assessment. نبسطها لك، روح اقرا what is the criteria of a good test. You will find the same thing, but focus on the idea that teachers sometimes they intentionally or unintentionally encourage learners to reproduce the same answer. It's like repetition. For example, memorization. We don't want that. We want students to be creative. هنا مثلا we give them, for example, problem solving situation. We want to give them a problem and they solve the problem. It's not they memorize an answer. This is the gist of the question you have asked, Ms. Rashid. Give us advice about scholarship. Scholarship, I don't think it's this right. The context here, it's all about PhD, but scholarship, I don't know. What do you mean exactly? You can contact me to at least elaborate the question so I understand. Would you please keep your live here? Inshallah, probably. I will. Anything we mentioned in the essay, we have to mention the source. شوف, it's not really. The way we correct essays وحتى في الجامعة in regular exams, we don't expect the learner to give us the source, but at least we expect that we read something. We don't want plagiarism, copy pasting. We want to feel that this is the production. We want to feel that this is the way of thinking of the learner. This is why I always advise my learners, when you write something, write it in a creative way. Try to reveal your personality in your writing. Give me something that I haven't read, that I'm not going to read. It's like your own personality in writing. Here I feel that it's not copy paste, because trust me, as teachers, we feel when it's copy paste. It reeks, smells. So don't do that. Show your personality, especially at the level of introduction. العموم بعد سهلة because هذوك سهلين. Development عادي سهل. المشكل في introduction كاين اللي يدير لك كوبي كولي في introduction تعرف باللي he or she is not answering the question. He just got these pieces of information from somewhere else. Concerning teaching English in the primary school, what do you suggest as PhD question? To me, for example, they can ask you about the importance of English teaching English at primary school in general. Here it takes you that English is so important as a lingua franca, as of science, and it's important to teach young learners. ممكن يهضر لك one of the question I suggested, for example, let's say, for example, they are going to talk about whether teachers have sufficient training. Maybe here in this case, you will talk about in-service and pre-service training. Maybe they are going to talk about the characteristics of learners themselves. They are all open questions. They are all questions. They're possible ones. How many body paragraphs can you write? The more, the better. The more, the better. Unless you are specifically instructed not to write too much, it's always the more. Better you write a lot, write a lot. أنا كي نلقى ورقة هكا شوية خشينة ولبس عليها. I'm curious. سقساني برك في الجامعة البارح قال لك لا تكتب بزاف تخلط. أنا جامي شفت واحد كتب بزاف ولقيته يخلط. جامي. اللي نلقاه كاتب بزاف نعرفو راه كاتب واثق واش راه كاتب. Usually I know that he or she is writing because he or she knows a lot. So I would advise that. Hello, great teacher. Thank you so much. So that assessment seems so broad as a concept. It is somehow. What are the most important ideas we need to know? Assessing learners, criteria of good assessment, criteria of good tests, assessing the learning process itself, assessing the teaching process itself, washback effect. I think assessing classroom activities, formative assessment, summative assessment, all of these. Competency-based pedagogy, please go in-depth discussion. I don't know how to mean by go in-depth discussion. You should also go in-depth question so I can know what kind of, because competency-based approach means focuses on the idea of competencies. You need to know how to do this. How to do this means you know about it and you know how to do it. For example, if I'm going to tell, let's say I'm going to write, right? I will help my students to write about a past event. So the competency here is writing past event. So I need to know to show them a lot of information, like the past, how to use the past simple, how talking about an event, constructing, all these to get that skill of really writing. المشكلة دايما قلت لك كي تهضر على competency based approach you need to demonstrate how do we know really you have mastered that skill. هنا عادة يديك ال project based approach يديك ال task based approach. So try to read with this, but usually this is the gist of it. Of course, there are a lot of information. So for example, if we are asked about specific approach, how can we relate it to other things in order to discuss the older paragraphs? Of course, we can write whole essay. دايما Miss Shema تفكري باللي the idea of an approach is so important. It's the way we think. First, it's the way we think about language. What is language to that approach? Our understanding of language is always related to that approach. In communicative approaches, we see the acquisition of language is the ability to communicate, to use it. Means what? للكلمة هذه اللي قلتها means that the role of the teacher is dictated and the role of the learner is dictated through this. Means that the teacher and learners, they should communicate. The learner should communicate. Means the teacher should help in the communication process. فهمنا هذه الإيديا؟ Of course, there are some details like the role of the learners, وش فيه, the role of the teacher, وش فيه. Then you have the interaction in the classroom. Since I believe that the learning language is to use it to communicate, it means everything in class should be based on communication. Assessment should be also based on communication. And even the tools that we are going to use. I'm going to use content that is going to enhance communication. In this, for example, we talk about authentic materials, authentic situation. The same thing about ESP. For example, you want to teach your learners communication. Let's say that we're talking about communication. So you should go into device situation. And there is a question like this, device situation that, of course, kind of a mimic or kind of simulate the same situation. Okay. What is meant by skimming and scanning? Oh, of course, you skim, you scan. You just Google them. That's so easy things to do. We'll try to focus on questions. This skim to scan, it's the type of reading when you read. So, oh, big difference. Literary criticism. يا ربي. Mr. Abdul Qadir, literary criticism, literature, civilization. راني متمني نقرأ so I can answer your question. I really trust you. Can we face a question about difference between testing? Bien sûr. Any question you can expect between testing, evaluation, and assessment. By the way, testing is part. Testing is part of our evaluation and assessment. Testing can be done to evaluate, and testing can be done to assess. If testing just for evaluation means you just want classification and marks. ندير لك أنا امتحان تاع كلاس مو باش نشوف غير اللي يربح. This is just testing to evaluate. But if I want to assess, I give you a test and I'm going to see your answers to understand the problems you have. So I'm going to amend it. The idea of assessment, there is always kind of providing a cure after for the problems you have read. But inshallah, I'm going to save this life. I always do that. Competency-based approach, I need more details. Competency-based approach with standard-based. I have I have no idea about standard-based approach. Trust me. This is the first time I hear standard-based approach. Begging your kindness, competency-based. As I told you, lead that competency تعاود ترجعيها definition of competency. It's the same, just not only know it, or not only the knowledge, but how to use that knowledge to perform something meaningful. You will have a competency. That's the idea of competency. You just need to develop it. Do you have any idea about how to ask questions of literature? No. Sorry, no. Is it really worth it passing the door? هي شوف, if we spread the negativity, is it really worth it? Trust me, people are going to pass it tomorrow. And 3 or 4 are not the number of candidates, they will win. And they will be happy. And their life will change. Others, they will either feel sad or it's going to push them. But trust me, it's worth all the effort, because why have you passed your why you passed your master classes? Because you just wanted a new degree. PhD is a new degree. أنا دايما نقول لهم شهادة عدد الناس اللي هازينها قليل، ما يقولكش لا راهم بزاف قليل كومباريها بماستر means that you should do it. وزيد كاينه حاجه كيما قبيله نشوف واحد كاتب I think شفت قريت قبيله بوست تاع واحد كبير في العرج 70 قال لك ربح ولا راه يفوت على الاقل، قال لك واحد علاه يفوت والتوظيف و70 عام. PhD is not about working only. It's about changing the way you think. Trust me, the moment you will have it or you are going to study PhD, your way of thinking is going to change. It's about that. When asked about methods used in teaching primary school, what should we talk about? شوف هي لحد الآن I don't know. هي نورمالمون احنا في الجزائر دائما كي نهضروا على competency based approach، نهضروا على communicative approach، يعني عادة كاع أنا بركي نقولوا نهضروا على learners. Since we are dealing with young learners, we still talk about communicative approaches and they need to use the language. But you can talk about some techniques from other approaches, like for example, total physical response. ما تقولش بلي I'm going to use just the total. Just you can say that the teacher can be resilient and adopt some of the techniques there. For example, involving learners physically in an activity. تهضر على task based approach اللي هو نفسها هذه competency based approach. You need them not only to you need to they can make project. نعطيك مثال مثلا family قال مثلا or a house. ترسم لهم house هكذا ممكن. But if you involve them in making house something concrete, this is not only going to they know the how, but they are going to push them to really draw it, make it, and at the same time learn English. What is exactly the washback effect? Washback effect, يقول لك it's the way, it's the phenomena that describes the way teachers modify their way of teaching to for the exams. نعطيك مثال، انا دوك حاب ندير امتحان وفي الامتحان هذا راه نعطيهم تمارين. انا في الطفل كي نكون نقربي I'm not going to teach them everything. I'm going to teach them just how to get good marks in my exam. And this can be so negative. خاطر هو البوشباك effect can be positive and can be negative. Negative واللي نخافوا. So you are going to change the way of teaching so you make sure that your learner is going to get better grade. This is the washback effect. What to focus on applied linguistics? It's so general. First, focus on the idea that applied linguistics is kind of multidisciplinary field that usually draws theories from other fields to help solve problems. That's the first thing. Then each field solve a problem in a particular way. And in case of second language acquisition theory, we want to understand first language acquisition theories and how we acquire language. Then we use that knowledge in language teaching. Can we face a question about 21st century? Trust me, something trendy, more likely. Even not, حتى كان ما جيش السؤال 21st century, most to talk about all the questions that you are going to face, you will need to talk about it. إذا كنت تهضر على communicative approaches now, it's not enough to talk about only learners they can communicate, but learners they can communicate and be critical thinkers, solve real problems, and participate in a globalized world, etc. like this. So trust me, you need them. So what about classroom management, discipline, disruptive behavior? What should we discuss in this question? It's simply put, you start always your introduction by saying that sometimes failure in teaching has nothing to do has nothing sometimes to do with the learners and the teachers and the content. Sometimes it has to do with the class and how the class is managed. هي أنا تدخل فيها destructive behavior, the organization of class, having good relationship, for example, managing a good management of time. All these can solve some problems because if you have a problem with your learners, such behavior or noise or anything, the class, the session is done. It has to stop. So this is so important. هنا تنجم تهضر على كما قلنا good to have good relationship with your learners, to for example to carefully manage time, classroom organizations, for example group work or pairs, etc. So all these can do. غير قراهم برك and you have to, but they are so important. The diagnostic tests, can we consider it a test for the sake of assessment? Of course, of course. We start with the diagnostic test in just for one thing. First, to know, kind of to use it to for how what's the word? It's like we want a level. We want a kind of راحت الكلمة. We need kind of to know the current situation, the current level of our learners now. Maybe you are going to assess from that the problems they have, if there is a kind of specific problems. So everything, yeah, so it is part of assessments. And often when we have a diagnostic test, the diagnostic test is used, yes, to design a course in case of ESP or even AGP. But even at the end, usually we do kind of comparison between the post-test and the diagnostic test to see that development, and do we still have problems that maybe we found at the beginning. How can I start my intro about discourse analysis? It depends. It depends, but most of the time, if it's only about discourse analysis, the most important thing about discourse analysis is really analyzing the text to discover that a hidden meaning or between the line meaning. So this is going to be your entry. Unlike competency-based approach, standard-based approach focuses on developing both competences. Trust me, I don't have any idea. That means makes me unqualified to talk about it. How is literature integrated in different approaches? There is this question that can be asked, for example, the place of literature in language teaching, or can we incorporate literature in language teaching? This is how you might find this question. Okay. Okay. Are summative assessment and evaluation the same? Not really. According to the definition, I found they seem the same, and sorry for asking many questions, so it's okay. Really helpful, happy for that. Now, دي كلمة assessment تفكر باللي the summative assessment and evaluation. Yeah, basically. كي تقول summative assessment and evaluation بصح هي كلمة summative assessment for evaluation. مش فاهم مش هم تحطهمش مع بعض. قال we have summative assessment for evaluation, but still the word evaluation, because we are playing just with words and synonyms, but the idea just to evaluate often is linked with the idea just of kind of categorizing, of kind of providing a value. Not like assessment is always kind of related with fixing, amending something. So when you said something trendy, I didn't get it. Something trendy, something new. حاجة اللي راها دوك الناس تهضر عليها. دوك مثلا نهضروا على blended learning because we are using it at university. تروح تهضر على ESP approach. Came some trends أنا حكيت عليهم. Some trends now, some approaches. هذه اللي الناس تحكي هذه هي الحاجة اللي تهمك. سنة دوك نهضروا مثلا على it's trendy now. We're talking about the implementation of English at primary school. It's trendy, something new. The teacher shouldn't use textbook. So he used to be creative. What do you think? Actually, أنا يجيني سؤال كيما هكذا I can take it everywhere. But textbooks are archaic now, something of the past. Now we have internet, we have tablets. When I have only one textbook, and you can't change it because they cost a lot of money. And when you have, for example, a tablet, so you can talk about the tablet. And by the way, Algerian government did implement the use of tablets, although in a very limited scope, but still, it was a decision by that. You can face a question like this. So, creative teacher, of course, you need to manage, you have to find resources. So, yeah. Syllabus design, any ideas? Syllabus design, if you are asked about ESP or EGP, Syllabus design is always related to first, since you have objective, you should have objective. You are going to select content. This is part of the design, syllabus design. You are going in the syllabus design. There is also the idea of learners' needs. You need to know them. In order to design situations, you need to design the tools, everything in syllabus design. But always remember, link it first with the idea of the approach. What kind of approach are you going to use? And this is going to oblige you to talk to set certain objective that of course reflect the approach, and content selection that of course going to help you with the objective. Metacognition strategies. This is not a question. Can you clarify? How can we integrate syllabus design when talking about didactics? It's everything. If I'm talking about the role of the teacher, ninja the role of the teacher from the syllabus, it's actually from the approach itself. Because if you say that the teacher in grammar translation method, I should be the one, I know everything. I'm going to be the person who knows everything. Then, of course, my activities are going to enforce the approach I'm teaching. So it's the same thing. So they are connected. Assessment, by the way, what are you going to assess? You are going to assess, sorry, you are going to assess the objectives that you set at the beginning of the course. So everything is connected. Okay, I got super tired. Okay, so 1 minute, please. 1 minute, I take a pause. Okay, so نمشوا هنايا بجاية. It's about applied linguistic and ESP. Can you give us means that you have to see how ESP هذا الفيديو حطيت الفيديو التالي اللي فيه about ESP. It's so helpful. حكيت فيه مثلا trends in ESP and how ESP was considered, some considered part of applied linguistics and some considered as independent discipline. Check that video, it's so good. I have reviewed an article there. What's the link between applied linguistic, contrastive analysis, error analysis, language teaching? By the way, في applied linguistic في روحها فيها contrastive analysis, which I'm not able to talk about, فيها error analysis and language teaching learning. All these are part, all these combined, they're used to enhance language teaching of a language. ماذا بيك تروح error analysis and you talk about how fostering mistakes and errors help in language teaching. This is you need it. Contrastive analysis, no, sorry, I can't talk about that. I don't have concrete information. How does Piaget difference? This is so, I don't have information about that. فأي حاجة هنقولها أنا راح تكون غلطة or misleading. I don't want to do that, so I need to read. Could you please explain the assessment and evaluation and testing to draw a general image? Leading to assessment, دايما تفكر when we talk about assessment, it's to fix something, to really fix something. I'm not giving you a test just to evaluate. Maybe I'm going to evaluate whether my objective are attained, that objective that I set at the beginning attained. But when I talk about assessment, I'm really trying to fix something. هنا ممكن يسقسيك مثلا سؤال whether all the exams what we do are just assessment exam or kind of evaluation. مثلا نعطيك مثلا sometimes we give them questions تلقى لا نوت وخلاص ما تلقاش مثلا ما تلقى والو تلقى نقطة. هنايا just evaluating. But if I for example go to correct a paper then I'm going to add my notes etc. So here the same thing. So I'm kind of evaluating but also there is assessment because I want to fix a problem. I have cast a question from posted the profile. Could you check them out? I will. اللي حطوا أسئلة جاوبنا مرة اللي فاتت إن شاء الله I will answer إن شاء الله. Can we face صحة? Okay, good luck. Could anyone tell where we're supposed to have our PhD? Please help Mr. or Mrs. Noor about this. Can they ask about the 9 guiding principle of? Oh, I don't know what kind of 9 guiding principle. And it's so difficult if they ask a very, very, very specific question. But at the end, every question can be asked. Every question can be asked. Well, of course, I'm going to stop here answering the question. But what I want to say, الحاجة اللي حابكم تتفكروها تتفكروها. معظم الناس راح تلقى عندك أفكار، بصح كي تقرا السؤال عادة أنت وحدك تليميتي روحك. You find yourself you have limited. والمشكل غير تخرج من الامتحان تقول يا كاين اللي حكيت على هذه، كاين اللي حكيت على هذه. So to avoid this problem, please don't don't panic and don't read the question while you're still stressed. Leave the question حتى قلبك يرتاح شوي. Then you answer. Please methodology. I will try to كاين video I have done already concerning methodology, but I will try to make a video inshallah إذا مش اليوم غدوة inshallah about it. How can I deal with this question? Is there a specific method? No. إذا سقسوك, this is the last question I'm going to answer. If you are ever asked about is there a specific method to teach, always remember to say that the teacher, when it comes to ESP, it's all about the learner's needs. There is not all one size fits all method, but the teacher has to adhere to learners' need in designing the syllabus itself. So it's not only the teaching method, it's the teaching method, it's the content selection, it's way of teaching, or are related to learners' needs. So this is why it's so important that there is not one single method when it comes to ESP. So thank you so much. اسمع اللي راح تفوت غدوة ربي يوفقكم إن شاء الله. This is my best. What can I say? أنا أقول ادعوا لي برك. Don't get mad because sometimes I get questions and I don't answer them. It's not something. It's Allah. I can't answer everyone, but I try my best. So ربي يوفقكم إن شاء الله. And what can I say? Have a good evening and bye.